I am Tara Jaramillo, and this is my podcast called The Monster Within. This podcast is based off of my experiences in being married to a narcissist and surviving domestic violence abuse. Please note and take care that the subject matter that I discuss may be triggering. I am dedicated to do this podcast in hopes of bringing awareness to abuse, domestic violence, and narcissistic behavior, in hopes that maybe I save someone's life. So in early April of 2023 in Wisconsin here, we had a really unusual warm weekend in early April. And it was so nice. Like, people were out riding, biking, motorcycling. Like, it was just one of these days that everyone was excited about. And on that day, Juan and I, it was a Friday, we were going to go up with the motorcycle and have dinner in Minocqua, one of our favorite places. And looking back, it was kind of a last-ditch effort probably on our marriage. Maybe he felt like he needed to salvage. I'm not really sure, but I knew that I had thoughts of divorcing him. I knew things were not happy. The cheating was kind of the last straw. And I could really see it. Our marriage was changing, just how he was treating me. We seemed like a bother, that he wanted to be single. And for whatever reason, we continued on to go to Minocqua. And I know a lot of people say when they hear abuse situations, like, why didn't you just leave? There's a lot at stake. One, you're kind of in this confusional state, especially with a narcissist. They keep you in this chaos kind of state, or kind of questioning yourself. You know, is this really what's happening? Is he changing? You know, what about all the history before? There's that trauma bond as well. So it's very complicated. And it's very complicated in the sense of sometimes your own pride gets in the way of what you wanted in life and how you thought your life was going to go to where it is now. And it's also probably during that time was the time that I was pausing. Like, I knew that things were changing and I wasn't sure the direction I was going to go. But when I look back on that time, I realized I had paused, and I realized that I knew that this was not going to last. And so on that nice Friday when everyone was out, it was very beautiful. My children went up to my parents at Tomahawk to kind of enjoy a weekend or overnight. And we were going to go up to Minocqua. During that day, his parents had off and they were going to go for a motorcycle ride. And after they got done eating just outside of Marshfield, they called Juan. And within about 2 to 5 minutes of that phone call that afternoon, they were in a very serious accident. And nobody knew. We didn't know until 7 p.m. But apparently, and we ate dinner, and all of a sudden Juan, seeing that his phone was blowing up, that they couldn't get a hold of his parents. His parents was going to watch one of his siblings' children, so their grandchildren, and they never arrived home to see these children. And we didn't know what happened to them. And it was later on when the hospital called that turns out that afternoon they were going on Highway 97 from Marshfield and going to try to go back home. And that's a dangerous highway. It's one of the worst. There's a lot of accidents, and it's a 2-lane. So a lot of people are trying to go fast. There's farms in between. So a lot of farm equipment and accidents. And what ended up happening was that they were in a slight incline on their motorcycle enjoying the day. And this lady in a 3500 work truck did not see them. They were in her blind spot, and she saw the one car go by. She hit on the gas to try to make it before this other car, and she smoked them. She hit them pretty direct. They both lost their left legs. And so immediately we're flying home at 7 p.m. from Minocqua, trying to get over to Marshfield. And it was the sickest feeling being on the back of this motorcycle after what had just happened. And we didn't know at the time how severe it was. And when we got to the hospital to see that they were hours and hours in surgery, and it was very violent. It was very distressing. To this day, it has changed my life. It's changed everybody's life, but it has been so volatile that I will never ride a motorcycle. And it was just the most unbelievable thing. I never thought that they would have made it out. And apparently, a lot of the people that arrived at the scene didn't think so either. And luckily, when they got in that accident, about 2 cars back was a police officer off duty, and he was able to save them. And Juan's dad did die for about 60 seconds. He left this earth for a little bit, and luckily they brought him back. But that accident had changed everything. It had shattered whatever we had left. It had shattered any obstacle that we had to face. It finally was the nail in the coffin. It was the last thing that kind of blew our marriage. And we didn't know at that time. But what ended up happening was his mom the next day was able to come off the ventilator, and she went down to a step-down unit. His dad, however, had a month of a flesh-eating bacteria, so he was a month in the hospital. And then he had to go into rehab. And so it was a lot of a hard time for everybody. It was very stressful. During that time, however, Juan ended up really changing. And maybe too, he couldn't keep his cover anymore. And this accident had ripped his final mask off. And it was interesting. I understand that his parents were through a horrible, terrific accident, but his mom started to really be mean to the dad. He wanted to call his family in Racine and let them know what's going on. And she took his phone and she deleted all the contacts that he had, for he wouldn't be able to tell any of them what happened or talk with them, because she didn't want him talking to them. And it was just little things like that that started. And at one time he goes, because he's obviously wheelchair bound until later when he gets his prosthetic. But he was asking to move into a chair to get around, and she would just start screaming at him and just yelling. And it was for the first time, 2 or 3 months later after this accident, I really started to see the mom and how her behavior correlated to my husband Juan's behavior. And all of a sudden, it was like my eyes were open, and I thought, you gotta be kidding me. I mean, she would just yell at him about the goofiest things, and he was just told to shut up. And it wasn't almost like he was a person. And Juan accelerated his abuse after this accident with me as well, really getting physical and violent and getting mean. And he didn't want to come home anymore. He did a lot of going over by them, but then he would go out to the bars with his friends or his coworkers and drink for hours. And then he would ride his motorcycle. And it was like, we just went through this. And part of me looking back is maybe he wanted to die. I don't know. I know that his personality was rocked after that. He became very more violent to my children and to me. We went for the 4th of July. We went about 20 minutes away to a town, and he said, I want to go to my mom's. And I said, no, I drew a boundary. And I said, right now your mom, and this had been for a couple of weeks already. I said, I don't appreciate how your mom is treating us and treating the family and treating her husband. I don't want to be around that negativity, and I don't want our children. She's going to have to figure out her emotions and feelings, but how she is acting is not okay. And he tried to push that boundary. And that 4th of July, he did. And sure enough, he went to his mom's, and I said, well, I'll leave. You can pick me up, or you tell me when to pick you up, and I'll come back for you. And he blew up at me after I came back and picked him up. He was not happy that I would not follow what he wanted. And I put that boundary, and there was other boundaries that were starting to get put down as well with me. But the biggest one was his mom, and how much of a tyrant and how terrible she treated a lot of her family. And again, I understand that she's been through a traumatic event, but to call people stupid and yell at them and degrade them, that is unacceptable. And I didn't want to witness that. And I didn't want my children to witness that and think that was okay. And he got really mad. He punched the steering wheel, almost caused an accident for us. And it was the hottest day And he finally turned around and we went back home, and he yelled at me how it was my fault that I ruined the 4th of July. And I said, okay. I just let him yell because at this point I wasn't going to argue with him. And a little while later, he cools down. He says, well, let's go, I guess, to that 4th of July event about 20 minutes away in a different town. And I said, I don't know if I really want to go with you. And the kids said, Mom, please, please come with us. And I said, okay, because I didn't want to ruin their day. And I went, and he got in a fight with my youngest child about something tedious. And it was a really hot day. And he tried to shove her in the car and let her sit in the car with no air conditioning. And I said, no. Him and I started fighting in the middle of the street. It was just kind of embarrassing too. But I was like, there's no way you can leave her sit in this car. Like, it's going to kill her. And finally he had her out, but he was in such a rotten, skullful mood. Like, he was just terrible. We also had a balloon rally event. And with my Crohn's, some days I don't feel good. I'm not proud of that. And I'm sad because I'm half the person that I used to be years ago. I used to be so much fun. But I get sick. Especially the heat really can pull me really sick and really down, along with my kidney stones. It just is awful. And during that balloon rally, he wanted me to go. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't feel good. Like, I need to stay in air conditioning. It's too hot. And I said, you can go with the girls. And he yelled at me and berated me for about an hour about how I'm such a bad mom for not going. And I'm such a bad person. And he can't believe he's stuck with me, and just the meanest things. And he then goes to this balloon rally with my children. Well, he's there the whole time. And then around 10 o'clock, I get a phone call, and it's my daughter crying, and he's yelling. And he said, yeah, tell your mom that it's her fault that we can't find the car, and we'll never make it home, and you'll never get to go home. And he went on and was getting her more and more upset for no reason. Obviously it was a field that they parked in, and he could have packed a flashlight, but he decided to blame me instead. And finally they get home, and I had to help calm down the kids because I never thought they were going to make it home. And just little actions like that, just being mean to me, riling up the kids for no reason, saying mean things, getting into fights with them. I mean, at this time they were 5 and 7. And I mean, really, there's not much to fight about at that age. Or at least I never had issues where I fought with them. I mean, to go and stick someone in a hot car, and he really was becoming unglued. He was just becoming an unhappy, foul, mean person. Through the month of July and through the time since his mom and dad were in the accident, Juan decided to go out drinking more with his friends, and becoming apparent that he didn't want to be home and he didn't like his life anymore. And so on the night of July 11th, 2023, I had been working downstairs. I had a little craft room, and I was working on my crafts. And he came down and he started yelling at me, and he wanted to blame me and argue about how his life had turned out and how unhappy he was. And he was really trying to bring me down. I remember him saying some really nasty things, and he asked why I wasn't crying and why I wasn't. And I just felt like I was kind of getting over it at that point. Like, after hearing some bad things about you, you're kind of over it. And I think I was taking my power back, and I was taking my boundaries back. And the best way to not lead to a fight was not to respond, right? Can't respond to nothing. And he yelled at me because I wasn't giving him the attention he wanted. And I just said, I want to work on my project right now. Thank you. And he went over and pulled the plug on our computer, and it shut down. And I had my work computer roughly in the same kind of area. And he looked at me and he said, you know what? Just because you're not listening to me and you're not doing what I want you to do. He went over and unplugged my work computer. And he was just so drunk and so angry. And I got up and I walked away. And he went and followed me. And we had this other room, and we had a freezer in this area. And he went and grabbed me by the back and threw me into the freezer. I mean, I had a bruise on my hips from where I had landed. And I said, Juan, I don't want to argue with you right now. I'd like to go to bed. Thank you. And he tried to stop me from leaving that room and going to my upstairs to my bedroom. And he hit me and he had pushed me back and he tried slamming the door on me. And it was becoming, this behavior kind of flagged me because it was like, this is pretty violent and aggressive. I didn't know really what to do. So I finally got away and I just went to bed and that was it. The next day, on July 12th of 2023, same kind of story as the evening before. He was very angry after he got home from the bar. He went earlier out with his friends in the same kind of way. He came home and he was angry again. And this time, however, ended up very violent, very, very scary. I am surprised to this day what happened. I did not initiate anything. I did not spark a fight. I again tried to back off. I did not want to get in a confrontation from him, and he threw me around and he strangled me about 3 times. And he put pressure on my neck. I tried to get away. This was almost 2 hours worth, 2 or 3 hours of harassing me, trying to really put me down. And I fought it off as much as I could. And I do apologize if I get a little teary-eyed. This is really hard because this is the first time I really felt absolutely abused and there was no instigation. And going back there with my memories is very challenging because it was a night that I thought I was going to die. And I tried to get away from him. I tried to run. He had thrown me into the walls multiple times. He had taken my phone, trying to break my phone. At one point, he walked away from me and let me be. And then he went and abused my dog. He beat up my dog really bad. And I knew what he was trying to do. He was trying to get me to come out and he wanted to start a confrontation. And I have never would have thought this violence would have occurred. I am still to this day, I cannot believe how this came about. And the final time that he pulled me out of bed where I was laying because I was trying to get away from him, trying to pretend. And looking back, probably if he would have left me be, I may not have left again. But this time he pulled me out to bed and I was screaming. And luckily, the children slept through most of it. Natasha woke up at one time, which had helped me because it turned his attention. But yet he blamed me for waking her up and that I'm such a terrible mom. And if I didn't act the way that I did, he would have never treated me like this. And I'm the problem. And at one point we have a steep staircase that is about 20 stairs or so, but steep. I mean, if I would have fell back and cracked my neck, I could have died. And he tried to shove me down those stairs 3 times. And I had never been so scared in my life. And when I looked at him, it was almost like there was no recognition in his eyes of like what he was doing. He was almost proud to be so mean to me. And he was almost happy that that he was trying to throw me down the stairs. And I remember holding on to the banister, just hoping for the life of God that it wouldn't break or that I would lose my grip. And I was praying to God. I just was like, oh my God. Finally, he leaves after the 3rd shove and he shuts the light off and he falls asleep within minutes. Like, boom, out. No thought, no nothing. And I just remember shaking and I ran all the way down to my downstairs and I sat there and I was shaking and I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't feel safe. I felt like I can't leave my kids. But then I'm like, there's no way I can get them up. Like, I don't know what to do. I can't. What if he gets up again? I didn't know what to do. And it's an awful feeling because this was like 3 hours worth of abuse that, I mean, just kept going. He'd leave me alone, come back, leave me alone, strangle me, and I'm trying to get away from him. And I knew like this was so violent. This was something that I never had experienced or seen. in this great length. I couldn't tell you how long it was that I was shaking in the stairs, but I decided that I needed to get help because I wasn't sure what the next part of this was going to be. I knew that he put Natasha back to bed and that the children were probably safe temporarily. So I grabbed my dog and I ran into the car and I drove off. And I went down to Wausau PD and I was shaking. I was shaking so bad. I was literally confused about what happened, how this happened, why it happened. I called my dad and I tried to explain what happened. I said, do I go with the police with this? Like, is this a big deal? Like, now looking back, what a silly question, right? Someone literally tried to kill me, and I'm asking if I should go to the police. And I went there, and I remember, I don't know his name. I remember what he looked like. He was buff. He had tattoos in his arm, brown eyes, and brown hair. And I cried to him, and I told him what happened. And I said, I don't know what to do. And he said, well, because I'm Wausau District, I can't help you, but I'm going to call the police officers from Weston and they can come and assist. And sure enough, a gentleman came and he took down my statement. And I told him about both days. And I said, I don't know what to do with this. Like, I'm so confused. I don't know what to do. And I just remember crying. I just remember being scared. And I told him my children are still there. Like, I have to go back. And he got about 4 more officers and we drove to my house. And it was so embarrassing. I don't think anybody was up. I don't know. But I live at the end of the block and I had to go through the whole neighborhood. And the humiliation I felt with the cops. And then the cops get there and we try to knock on the door and he wouldn't. Juan did not get up. He did not get up. And the cops had to wake him up. And he immediately said that I was lying, that I'm abusive, that it was my fault. It was pretty intense. And the officers cuffed him and took him outside and took him to jail. And this was a Thursday night. And after they leave, I'm just so shocked and so sick. I don't know what to do. I call my parents. They come down. The next 24 hours are such a blur. I go back to work like nothing happened. I feel sick to my stomach. And then I realize he's going to be in there until Sunday, is what the officer told me at one point. And I went and I started changing all the bank accounts and putting them in my name for he couldn't touch them. I reached out to the women's community and I was so thankful I had them. So thankful. Because they were such a support. They're probably the support I needed in Green Bay and didn't even know that I needed it. And I told her what happened and I said, I feel crazy. Like, I feel crazy that this all happened. And the representative was so supportive and so kind. And one of the things I'll never forget that she told me was that when a spouse puts his hands to strangle you, you are 7 times higher to die by strangulation than any other form of abuse from him. And to me, it hit me because I don't want to die for someone that I love that by their hands. Like, that just sounds so sickening. I didn't do anything to deserve this. I'm a good person. I try really hard. I'm a good mom that loves her kids. And I've tried to keep this relationship and this family together as much as I could. And when she said that, I felt something inside me just knew that it was time to leave Juan and it was time. This is just unacceptable. Unacceptable behavior who are you to put your hands on me? Why is that allowed? Why is that? That's not even love. And he didn't get out to that Sunday, but at that time, a restraining order was put in place. He broke that 3 times. He stalked me. He tried to reach out through letters to my kids that were written for me. He tried to reach out to my dad. He tried to reach out to all my friends, social media. Like, it became, I realized really quickly the person that I thought I had was not the person that was the true person at all. And I wonder when I look back on things, where was the breakdown? Where was he this person the entire time? The answer is probably. And I blew through the red flags and he hid himself. And then after the violence occurred with the accident with his mom, I think that was just enough. His mom and dad. It was just enough to turn off the mask. That's the only plausible explanation that I have, because he already didn't want to be a family anymore. He wanted to be single. He wanted to party.